From the late 1970s up to the present, Manchester has given rise to some great bands. Whether Britpop or rave, Manchester and Manchester bands have led the way. At the centre of the city's emergence as a musical powerhouse is one band, New Order, one record label, Factory, and one club, the Hacienda. This family tree tells the story of New Order, how they began as Warsaw, became Joy Division, survived the death of their singer Ian Curtis, changed their name and sound, and in the process changed the course of pop music. Their story intersects with the history of a host of other Manchester bands, including the Buzzcocks, the Happy Mondays, and Monaco.
I would like a place I could come up on, have a conversation on the telephone.
Dance, 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 dance to the radio. Oh, I was call out when the going gets tough.
I had to crucify some brother today, and I don't dig what you gotta say. Ever fall in love with someone, ever fallen in love with someone, ever fallen in love with someone you shouldn't fall in love with.
The story starts with the Buzzcocks in the summer of 1976. Two college friends were inspired to put a band together by hearing the Sex Pistols. They were soon joined by two others excited by the new music, had a rehearsal, and immediately gelled.
You put four people in a room and it just kind of works, the right four people.
I mean, none of us were ashamed about the noise we were making. In fact, I think that's what set us apart from most other people, is that we had no shame. And for us, the more chaotic and absurd it was, the better.
See, the first ever gig we did was, it was about 5 weeks after that first rehearsal that was supporting the Sex Pistols at the Leicester Free Trade Hall in Manchester.
And we just, hit everything we could, and made as much noise as possible. And then we're suddenly talking to all the local kids who were like, wow, we didn't know there was a band in Manchester, It'd been like the winter of the mind for people for years, and suddenly there was a thaw,
The gig inspired a lot of people in Manchester.
It's like somebody opening a door in a darkened room. It was really weird. It was just like that was what you wanted to do.
Well, up until punk, you kind of thought to be a pop star you had to be you have some kind of talent that's given to you by a sweep of the hand of God, and then you become this magical guitarist that could play 10,000 notes in 3 seconds. But punk sort of showed us that anyone can do it.
And they were doing it. They were doing what you wanted to do, which was tell the world where to go, like that. And it was just like that. I thought, God, yes, that's it. Freedom.
The reason why I wanted to play drums was I went to see Buzzcocks. I just thought, well, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to be on stage with Buzzcocks.
Using £1,000 borrowed from friends and family, the Buzzcocks released their own EP, Spiral Scratch. This DIY approach inspired other young punks.
Went and bought the bass guitar because Bernard had a guitar, and I thought, well, 4 strings has to be easier than 6, so that seemed a good way to start. And then we went home and sat in his grand's front room in Broughton in Salford, sort of thinking, what the hell do we do now?
My grandmother had an old sort of 78 gramophone, and I wired 2 quarter-inch jack sockets to the needle of the gramophone. We plugged into the needle of the gramophone.
And we were both going through that with the guitar and the bass, going through it, just playing punk music, and we just wrote all the early stuff like Guts and stuff with no vocals or anything, and just started. And then we were a band, the 2 of us, and we just started looking for everybody else then.
They left a card in the window of the local record shop.
And I got all these lunatics phoning up. I remember one guy, and he arranged to meet him at a pub in Didsbury. And it was this hippie guy, and he had no shoes on, and he had like a cushion cover for a coat on, like an armless sort of cushion cover. And we were in punks, and he was like this hippie. And he got us back to his flat, me and Ucky, and he sat on these cushions. And he had a balalaika, and he started playing this balalaika, and he had a book of poetry. And he was reading out his poetry, playing balalaika, and we were sat right in front of him, trying not to laugh, you know.
The Buzzcocks faced their first major test when Howard Devoto left to form the band Magazine. Pete Shelley moved to vocals, and his old school friend Garth Davis joined the band.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Garth was amazing. There was something in him that when you pushed a button, he'd explode. But eventually, you know, he drank too much and got out of control, you know. He burnt himself out to the point where his last 2 gigs, he couldn't actually... He'd come on and sing a bit and then throw the bass down and go off and then come back and do like that. So we couldn't carry on with him, you know.
Well, he didn't like gravy. So when he ordered something and they put gravy on, that was the ultimate insult.
He'd go up, ask for chicken and chips, and as normal, they'd put the chicken and the chips on the plate and usually stick a few carrots and a few token peas on there and a bit of gravy or whatever. He'd wait until he got all the cutlery and he'd sit down and then he'd look at it and he says, I asked for fucking chicken and chips, who said I wanted fucking peas? And then all of a sudden the peas would go whoosh right across the other side of the room.
What do I get? Oh, what do I get?
He had a lot of strange things, but I mean, he was his own person, you know, and he wanted things the way that he wanted them.
The Buzzcocks brought in Steve Garvey and at last seemed to have a settled line-up. With Warsaw, things were still fluid. They'd seen a singer, Ian Curtis, around at punk gigs and decided that he might be the man for them.
Because he was quite noticeable because he had like a green flak jacket on with hate on the back in white tape, which we thought was quite interesting.
Became friends with him, and I kind of then met him on the scene. We didn't know he wanted to be a singer. And every time we'd go out then, we'd speak to him and his mates. They were called the 2 Ians because there was another guy called Ian. He was with him.
And the guy Ian was working with dropped off and he came and joined us.
All they needed was a drummer.
Drummers seem to be arseholes for some reason.
The first drummer we had was Tony Tabac, and he got shopped because he came up with this great scheme of if you sell dope cheaper, you sell more of it. And he never realised that as soon as he did that, all the other dealers just shopped him.
One of them even wanted to bring his girlfriend to gigs. I mean, that's just not on, is it? He went straight away.
And then Steve answered an advert that Ian put in Macclesfield.
They arranged to meet for an audition outside Strangeways Prison in Manchester.
Old Mark II Jag pulls up, you know, it's getting a bit 60s gangsterish this now. And this very young-looking lad gets out, and this other chap, I thought, he said, that's Bernard there, how you Bernard? I thought the other lad was his dad, but it wasn't. That was Ucky.
Yeah, he just came shuffling out of his car very nervously. It was quite funny. Because he no, I shouldn't say that, no. I'm not going to say that. His mother used to dress him. So he always wore very strange clothes.
His personality fitted in with us, and he didn't seem to have any dickhead traits at that point.
I think the fact that I had some tins of drink with me helped. I think I bribed them with Coke and Vimto. So I was in. That was it. I was in Warsaw. Yeah, hey, a punk band.
Warsaw were finding it hard to get gigs because there was another band called Warsaw Pact, which led to all sorts of confusion. The band decided to change their name to Joy Division.
We did our first gig at Pips in Manchester, and I remember Ian got thrown out for kicking glass around the dance floor. had to beg the bouncers to let him back in. And then we did our first gig and all my friends from Salford had a huge fight. It was a great night, that one.
I began to suspect that the reason nobody was giving us any gigs was because there was always a fight.
In desperation, Peter Hook went round to see a local promoter.
I'd been trying to pester him for ages, and I said, oh, you know, I'd come about the support gig for Susie and the Banshees, and he went, oh, just give that away. I said, oh, God, I said, who'd you give it to? And he went, Joy Division. I went, oh, that's us. And he went, oh, I mean, I
remember playing a gig in Oldham, and 2 people turned up, and one of them left because we weren't the band they'd come to see. But we did it anyway.
While Joy Division was struggling to make a mark, the Buzzcocks, slightly to their surprise, had entered a golden period of hit singles. They were largely bittersweet love songs written by Pete Shelley and took the band to a much wider audience.
I suppose it stopped my mum and dad asking me when I was going to get a proper job.
Oh, my love again. What I say is true. Though it may sound plain, I love you. Enemies want to read the life can offer. And this isn't true love, but I am sure.
Joy Division were becoming increasingly frustrated at not getting gigs. The only one they had lined up was the Stiff Chiswick Challenge, a national band competition that had come to Manchester. In the audience were Anthony Wilson, a local TV presenter, and Rob Gretton, a local DJ.
We went on last, and everyone, by the time we went on, it was like 1 o'clock and everyone had gone home.
we were so wound up, it was Ian went berserk and smashed the table up and was rolling about and broken pint pots at the front of the stage and ripping the stage apart and all this. Like, he really went, you know, because we were just so wound up. And them two must have made an impression.
And that night, watching all the bands, all the Manchester bands of '78 play, and ending up with Joy Division. And Joy Division only played 2 numbers and got the plugs pulled, but, you know, chalk and cheese. There's this lot on stage, and they are completely different from the other 11 bands. And I defined it, I suppose, in my brain that night as they're there because they have to be. You know, this band are on stage, it's inevitable because they have to, because something's trying to get out of them. You know, they're not on stage because they want to be rock and roll stars, because they want to be in this culture, because they think it's fun. They're on stage because they have to be.
As a result of that evening, Rob Gretton became Joy Division's manager. For Anthony Wilson, it only accentuated his frustration with his career in mainstream TV. The final straw was when his music show, So It Goes, was axed.
It was just such an honour to be, you know, connected to this fantastic art form, which I was obsessed with. And suddenly to say no more was just, ooh. And I couldn't really bear that.
To maintain his connection with music, Anthony started a club night called Factory for local bands to play. Then, using a small legacy left to him by his grandmother, he started releasing their records on a label he also called Factory. From the start, it was clear the label would be an unusual business.
Sadly, over the years, none of us has ever had that desire to be rich. You know, we'd really like to be rich, very much. I'd love to be rich. But it's like item 57, you know. Not that I don't want to be rich, but there's like 56 things that come first, you know.
Factory had a talent for spotting and signing local bands, and throughout the 80s became the Manchester record label.
In a way, Factory has always had the band that changes music. Joy Division, New Order changed music. The Smiths were wonderful, but they didn't. The Happy Mondays changed music. The Stone Roses didn't. A wonderful first album with great songs, and then the influence of the Mondays rhythmic thing.
No one more typified Factory's attitude of signing an artist because they like them rather than because of their commercial potential than Vinnie Riley. Vinnie started life in the punk band Ed Banger and the Nosebleeds, but soon his musical training began to show itself.
Part of the fun for me was, in the middle of this mayhem that was a Nosebleeds gig, to do something that was musically very sophisticated in terms of pop music. That, you know, from my classical training and all that stuff, I'd suddenly do just, you know, a 2-minute guitar piece with the bass player frantically trying to do anything that was kind of vaguely bassy to it, and the drummer was actually quite a very good drummer, actually, who was following it. And Eddie would be, just having a fight somewhere with someone in the audience,
Vinnie Riley went on to form Durutti Column. In the punk and post-punk period, they stood out by releasing near-classical ambient music. They remained resolutely uncommercial. Their first album, The Return of the Durutti Column, was released with a sandpaper sleeve so that it would destroy the other albums around it in the shop racks.
Well, I think Factory, we're a kind of mixture of punks and hippies. We've got a lot of the hippie philosophies and stuff, which is, just funny, really, and quite gentle, but we've also got that edge that the punks had in '76, which is, anything goes, anything is valid, try anything at all, because you just never know.
Joy Division recorded an album, Unknown Pleasures, and playing live, Ian Curtis's stage presence began to attract attention.
Dance, 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 dance to the radio. Dance, 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 dance to the radio. Dance, 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 dance to the radio. Dance, 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 dance to the radio. Oh, I was called out when the going gets tough.
Ian's sort of commitment and his pushiness, and you could see it in his face, he meant it. And that made you mean it, there was no flippancy about it at all. He really had the power to move people.
Dance, 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 dance to the radio.
Ian would get pissed out his head on Special Brew, and he'd just be like this demented lunatic with like flaming arms, but it was exciting, really exciting.
After a long period of touring, the Buzzcocks were beginning to run out of impetus. The cracks really started to show when they came back from a tour of the United States.
Pete had gone off into some other world. In fact, we all had, We'd taken on America and it'd taken us in some ways.
We'd become more popular than we thought was proper. I always remember when we first started out and we'd do things, if anybody asked for my autograph, I'd ask for theirs, thinking, why do you have to ask for me? Because there's no different. But then people would go, well, why do you want mine? You'd end up having these long arguments, so it just became easy just to sign. But you were signing away a part of yourself.
We was living together in each other's pockets. We was either on tour or in a studio.
I mean, nothing would happen in the studio till the drugs came, and then nothing had happened until we'd actually come down a little bit.
So all that side of it started to take its toll after a while, It's like being married to someone all the time, but being married to 4 people,
I got a letter, a solicitor's letter through the post, real, in all this formal language that Pete has ceased his relationship with the group Buzzcocks and they're here for and all the rest of it.
Pete Shelley left the band to start a solo career.
And it's like, that's it. That's the way he's leaving the band. He's not even going to sort of write his own letter or maybe ring us up. So if that was a bit of a kick in the pants,
John Marr and Steve Diggle joined forces for Flag of Convenience, John eventually leaving to start his own Volkswagen car customising business. Joy Division were at last beginning to attract a following. However, driving back from a gig in London, they began to notice that all was not well with Ian Curtis.
We got near Luton, and he just started making this growling sound in the front of the car. And I remember I had the flu and I had a blanket over me, and he kept turning around and pulling the blanket off me, and I said, "What are you fucking doing? Give it." And I pull it back, and then he'd pull it off me. I thought he was just messing around and being childish.
And he'd been a bit crabby. You know, but he just thought, oh, you know, it's after a gig, a bit of a wild gig, loads of people, you know, shaking your hand and all that lot. And he went very quiet, and then all of a sudden, you know, he was flying about.
You know, punching the windows and the windscreen, punching Steve, who was trying to drive the car at 70 miles an hour down the motorway. And then he just started banging his head against the windscreen. We obviously knew something was wrong. And that was it, really. That was his first epileptic fit. You know, which was beginning of the end, really.
Someone take these dreams away.
Joy Division were poised to leave for their first tour of the United States, but Ian Curtis's health was still causing concern.
This stage he was on heavy barbiturates that just kind of really affected his personality. 1 minute he'd be laughing, the next minute he'd be crying. You know, he had it quite strong.
20 years ago or whatever, I don't think they had particularly honed the treatment that they've got now. So, I mean, the simple reason that he was ill was he had epilepsy, and they were treating him for it. That got him depression. He had marital problems, and it just all got too much for him. It's quite simple.
We talked him out leaving the band and said, look, just let's take a year off while you recuperate. Take a year off, sort your life out, you know, and then see what happens. As I remember, he wanted to leave the band and go and open a sandwich shop in Plymouth or something. Why did he want to do that? No, it wasn't a sandwich and book shop in Plymouth. By this time, he'd split up with his wife and he was staying at my house in Salford. I arranged to meet him for a drink on a Saturday night, and he didn't turn up. So I went over to a friend's and I got a phone call there. He said, "I've got a bit of bad news." I said, "What?" Talk about an understatement. He said, "Well, Ian's committed suicide."
The police phoned me up and told me on the Sunday morning that we were going to America that afternoon. We were supposed to be leaving.
Ian's gone. What? What? He's dead.
And the whole room just turned upside down and started spinning like this. And I was in a shock, totally shocked about it. And you know, it's like someone hit you with a sledgehammer. But he had it in his blood, you know. He's one of them guys who had it in his blood.
Ian's death kind of justified, if you like, you know, the gloom and everything. It was like it was the icing on the cake, and that's a really bad thing to say about anybody dying, but it was kind of like, whoa, yes, that's it now. You know, he's gone with the greats. You know, they were miserable. He had a tortured life, and oh God, it must have been hell. And in a way, it kind of like summed up Joy Division to a lot of people. It was just something that's kind of, we understood, really. I mean, we'd always said, you know, if one of us leaves or whatever, you know, we'll carry on. So we just said, so we're carrying on. Yeah, right.
Bernard Sumner took over the vocals, and they decided to change the band name.
Went for a meeting in the pub to change the name. And remember, we had that little shortlist, was the Khmer Rouge, the Witch Doctors of Zimbabwe, and New Order. So me and Bernard voted for New Order, and them three voted for Witch Doctors of Zimbabwe. So that was the name. So me and Bernard, I said, well, that's it, I'm leaving. I'm not being in a band called Witch Doctors of Zimbabwe. No way, man, that's the end of that. And so Rob went, oh, if you're that bothered then, well, you know, which was, I think, maybe in part of New Order's downfall, was that it wasn't the majority vote that got it, it was always the ones that were upset that got their own way, which, you know, with hindsight was too much of a compromise, maybe.
New Order looked to strengthen their sound and asked Gillian Gilbert, who was Stephen Morris's girlfriend, to join.
Well, Gillian was Steve's girlfriend, so we knew her anyway from coming to gigs. Because by this time, we allowed people to bring their girlfriends to gigs.
Gillian had played with us as Joy Division when Ian was ill, played guitar. I mean, she wasn't a very accomplished guitarist when she started. I think we thought that she could play, but when she actually came to us, I mean, God give her that. She had a lot of balls, if you'll forgive the expression, Gillian, to do it. But she stood up and did it, which was great, you know. And she just went and learned. Obviously, went along.
It was a bit weird because I was all set to go to college. I'd done a year there in Stockport Tech College to do graphics and business studies. So it was a big jump for me.
Being a couple within the band wasn't easy.
In any group, it's going to be tricky because you get conflict of interest, don't you? I mean, it's difficult keeping a relationship when you're in a band with somebody, let alone being in a band with somebody when you're in a relationship with them, you know. I mean, I don't envy them that. I really didn't envy them that.
Yeah, it was a bit strange. You couldn't really say, oh, you, don't do that.
While New Order was sorting out their future, drummer Mike Joyce, who'd been inspired to make a go of music by the Buzzcocks, had been playing for 2 years in the punk band Victim. They'd released 2 singles, and Mike had become firm friends with bassist Wes Graham. But they were going nowhere when Mike got the call for an audition with a new Manchester band called the Smiths.
I remember going back to my flat in Whalley Range and speaking to the lads that lived there, and after rehearsing with the Smiths and saying, you know, that this band, they're great, you know, they sound really good. I think, you know, they could be as big as, you know, the Psychedelic Furs.
Mike Joyce had a hard choice to make. Was he going to stay with his friends or join the new band? If he joined the Smiths, it would mean the end for Victim.
I spoke to Wes, and I said, you know, it's a tough decision, but, you know, I've got to do it. And he said, well, that's fair enough, you know. It's what you want. And I said, well, it is. And rather than kind of sitting there and playing drums thinking, oh, I want to be in that band, I thought it would have been a bit unfair, really, to do that. So I just kind of severed all ties, and I went into A1 Music in Manchester the next day, and all their equipment was there for sale.
But no more apologies, no more.
Mike Joyce was now a member of one of Manchester's premier bands. New Order were about to go through some major changes of their own. While in America, they went to clubs like New York's Danceteria and Paradise Garage and started to change their outlook on music.
I think we just started getting into dance music instead of going to see groups, you know, in live gigs. We just always like going to dance clubs. Dance like mad fools.
Various substances opened my eyes, my ears, to the beautiful sound of precise, strict rhythm and electronic music. And when I came back, because I'm quite a technically minded person, I built a synthesizer from components.
Bernard was always sort of like that, quite vociferous in the way he wanted this thing. It's probably because he was trying to get rid of me. You know, and he just kept amassing it, and Steve was really into it, and Steve would go off and read the manual.
I'd always wanted to be a bit of a drum machine myself, you know, so it was great to have this. I thought you could get this machine to do the boring bits, and I could just do the, like, the clever bits.
He'd heard this Donna Summer riff, the drum riff, boom, 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 boom.
Did I think I was going to alienate a core audience with Blue Monday? I've never had a thought like that, actually. It's never occurred to me. Fuck the audience. That's not I couldn't imagine even thinking about that. It was, no, it was cool. I thought it was fabulous, but I had no idea it was that important.
How does it feel when you treat me like you do?
Blue Monday became the biggest selling 12-inch of all time. The band gained more fans than they lost.
We knew that we'd lose people, but we were sick of these pious wankers who because of Joy Division, took everything we did so goddamn seriously, and we weren't serious people. Even Ian wasn't serious. You know, not at all. It was a right laugh.
I think if you're a fan and you change, you don't like change at all. But I think you've got to change to move on, and instead of being stuck in doing the same sort of music.
Tell me how should I feel? Tell me now, how should I feel? Now I stand here waiting.
With funds generated by New Order's success, Rob Gretton decided that it would be a good idea to open a club.
Rob decided that we should put something back into Manchester. He's like that, Rob. And he wanted us to open a club because basically there was nowhere we could go.
No, we've had a club, Rob. We had the Factory. You don't know what it's like, Rob, to have a club and no one comes. Rob, we don't want to do this. This is so, we've been there, Rob. And Rob went, "Ooh." So we went, okay.
We thought, yeah, great. One night a week, hire a place in Manchester. Yeah, great idea. And then we found out that no, it wasn't that. It was we're going to build a club and buy the club, and it's going to be fucking huge.
And I had to pay to get in for the first night. I should have known.
The club was not an instant success.
Empty. Early days, empty. We opened 6 days a week or 7 days a week because we thought it was our social duty for about a year and a half. And I think we probably had a reasonable Saturday night, and every other night was about 5 people.
And you went out to a club. The ones you liked best were the ones that were dark and were clammy sort of little places, and then to go into this aircraft hangar that was like in summer it was daylight all the time, and you could see the two people. So,
if you ask what it was like in the first couple of years, we lost a further 400 grand or something, God knows. But it looked good.
New Order had released a string of hit singles throughout the 1980s, and under the Factory umbrella went unhindered by the rock business.
We basically, because we were on Factory, we never had anything to do with any industry people, any levies or all this razzmatazz that goes with it all. And we were just left alone. We were just working at home, knocking around with our friends, being normal. We were quite normal people for a long, long time. We never had any money. I didn't earn any money until I was like 32. And they didn't have a bean. The Hacienda was losing fortunes before I was even getting paid. It was costing us 10 grand a week, and we were on 50 quid each. We were losing 10 grand a week in the Hacienda and things like that. It was very interesting. Very interesting.
I remember Rob once at some big row at Real World in Bath shouting at Barney, "Do you want a yacht?" And Barney went, "Yes!" "Will you do what is required to get a yacht?" "No!" And that kind of sums the whole thing up, really.
I didn't give a fuck about career or whether we're going to be successful. We didn't give a damn about success. We weren't bothered about being on top of the pops, not at all. No, we just wanted to go and have a good time with our friends.
The Hacienda had introduced a club night devoted to the emerging dance music from the USA, and at last started to get people in.
While I was giving the staff speeches about however successful we are with True Faith and Substance, there's another youth revolution around the corner, and we don't know if it'll happen here or elsewhere, and we don't know what it will be, but let's keep our eyes open. And even while I'm saying that, one of our own groups is hanging out in our club selling small little tablets coming out of America, and one member of the band standing on the stage on his own with his arms in the air. So there's me giving a speech about look out for the next revolution, and it's already happening.
The Happy Mondays started life as a gang of mates from Little Holton, one of Manchester's larger council estates. Bez joined the band as the dancer.
We're all from the same area. We all had the same desperate thoughts, lived the same desperate lives, and all had the same expectations. No, when we left school, no one was going to get a job. We'd all been told we was all shit and we weren't going to do anything, so that was our bond, you know what I mean? That feeling of like telling everyone to fuck off. What I thought I was doing at the time was like a war dance. It was like my big fuck off to society. Like, I'm a mental mad fuck and I'm right in your face now, and what you're going to do about it. It was like and that's a desperation really, or something like that, you know what I mean? But at the same time it's like you ain't going to control me. I'm fucking completely out of it, and I'm going to fucking go all the way to the top doing it.
The Hacienda found itself at the centre of a dance explosion and became one of the coolest clubs in Europe. Anthony Wilson looked on bemused at all the attention the Factory empire had unwittingly created.
The big point about Factory is everything that seems like a clever idea or great strategy and wonderful whatever was always complete accident, complete mistake, and is either post-rationalisation or, as we prefer to call it, praxis, which is you find out what you're doing by doing it, or you find out why you're doing it by doing it. So, for example, the Mondays, you know, let's sell a band on the basis of being completely outrageous, sort of drug-dealing lunatics, and let's make up these stories every day. No, you just sat there and it happened to you.
The Mondays' rise to success was meteoric, and they went on to have a string of hit singles to become, along with New Order, Factory's biggest selling act. New Order had spent a great deal of the 80s touring the world, and it was that money that had helped the Hacienda to keep afloat during its difficult period.
Every time that we earned a lot of money, we felt that we were doing it for the club, not for us, which again put me off touring. I thought, well, I'm not going to end up in hospital and make myself ill for a nightclub. So I stopped, you know, I got sick of it.
Bernard Sumner started to feel restless, and other members of New Order began to stay away from their own club.
To tell you the truth, right, the Hacienda, the reason I didn't go is every time I went there, you know, I'd see something needed. You'd see something needed doing, like, you know, oh God, I could do a repainting now. Oh God, this floor needs doing. Oh Christ, oh no! And it's like I couldn't relax.
You'd have like really heavy meetings like every week about the club, really heavy, about financial problems, about gang problems, about violence.
It stopped being the happy matey vibe and became something that was a little bit frightening.
And it became like a fashionable thing to be bad as well, you know what I mean? The badder you are, the fucking cooler you were, you know what I mean? So it was all like part of that thing, you know what I mean? I don't know, it just blew up.
Some hysterical meeting, I kind of go, come on guys, come on, it's been so wonderful, let's be honest. If there was a button and you could press it and the Hacienda would never have existed, come on, what would you do? And Barney leans forward and goes, show me the fucking button.
It wasn't just the club that was causing pressure within New Order. They began to pull in different musical directions.
I felt that I reached a point in New Order where it was these 4 musicians, and we spent a number of years together, and we didn't even have a producer, so there was no outside influences coming into the band at all. It was only our influences, and we were bouncing off each other. But the echo started sounding the same all the time.
Bernard Sumner started working on a solo project called Electronic.
Can we meet on the street, maybe tomorrow?
And I was really shocked because I'd never envisaged not having New Order ever. I mean, I'd had New Order for like 16 years. It'd been my life. Very important to me. More important than anything, even your family, you know.
You feel a bit unwanted. Really.
Peter Hook formed his own solo project, Revenge. Stephen Morris and Gillian Gilbert went on to form the ironically titled The Other Two. Meanwhile, the Buzzcocks had come together again. However, they did have initial reservations.
Well, reservations whether it was relevant, but then it seemed like it was. It seemed like it had a chance of doing something. But because one of the strange things is that we hadn't gone away. Your people hadn't forgotten about us. I mean, that was a very surprising thing.
I had some new songs to play, and Pete had some as well, so, you know, we dabbled around with a few of those, and we thought, well, we've still got this contemporariness as well as our past.
I always said, and I'll admit it, that there is no way I'm ever going to do a reunion, because it's always been something that, when other bands have done it, I thought it's a really crap thing to do, you know.
John Marr needed persuading to drag himself away from his car business and go on a tour of the United States.
It was a money thing for me. I'll come straight out and admit it. I got a bit of a wedge out of it. It wasn't massive like, but it came in handy. Probably paid for some of the gear that's in here now.
John Marr felt uncomfortable in the new Buzzcocks and intended to leave at the end of the tour. The band had to find a new drummer. Mike Joyce, in between jobs after the Smiths split, got a call from his former heroes.
So they said, you know, we're going to do a tour and go to New Zealand and Australia and Japan and America and of course I went to said, well, hold on, let me just check the calendar, and they just put me hand over the phone, and I went, yes, and then said, yeah, I'm free for that, yeah, I might be able to do that.
Mike Joyce met the man who had inspired him to be a drummer.
It was a real big deal, you know, and it was as though I was speaking to like Claudia Schiffer or something. It was really sad, you know. I was like going like, oh, hi John, yeah. Got some trousers like yours, great, aren't they?
Factory's finances had begun to unravel, and they were counting on both New Order and the Happy Mondays to produce albums to ease the cash flow. The Happy Mondays rock and roll lifestyle was beginning to catch up with them, with notably Shaun Ryder in the grip of a heroin addiction.
They decided it would be a really good idea to go to Barbados, the drug capital of the Caribbean, and make the record there.
The idea was to go somewhere where there was no gear, but what happened at the airport, X had like his always supply of methadone, and he threw his bag on the floor at the airport, and the whole lot went, you know what I mean? So by the time we got to Barbados, he didn't have his safety net.
My biggest regret is, I was in my hotel room in LA with Vet and got these phone calls about the complete chaos in Barbados, right? Complete chaos. You know, it's like, oh my God, this is, you know, we've stopped his per diems now, but, you know, he was stopped at midnight last night. He had a van outside the back of the studio. He was loading the 2 studio sofas into the van to take down to town to sell for crack. And by God, you better come out here, Tony. And I thought, right, okay. I'm in LA thinking, I go LA, Barbados, London, back to Manchester. And then I looked at this map. You know what Barbados? You think Barbados is like somewhere there, don't you? But it's not. It's down near South America somewhere. And I looked at it and thought, no fucking way can I get to Barbados. I went back to Manchester and didn't go to Barbados. I do regret that. I would like to have actually physically, although I was there on this phone going through it, I would like to have physically been there for the disaster.
Maybe I've forgotten.
Factory were caught out by a slump in the property market and went into receivership. New Order moved to London Records and went on to release the big-selling Republic album. The Mundys split. Shaun Ryder and Bez were later to make a successful comeback with Black Grape. Peter Hook's second solo project was a group called Monaco. His co-writer and guitarist, David Potts, encouraged him to rediscover his love of the bass guitar.
I've always been a fan of what Hooky does, like the way he plays bass. And rather than, go off on the Revenge trip, which was just sort of getting away from New Order. I mean, I encouraged him to be more New Order-ish.
He'd actually go on here, I'll play the bleeding thing, play it. I don't want him too much like New Order, because he used to get so depressed about, New Order not gigging and stuff.
Go on, why? It's what you do. You should do what you're best at.
And of course it's in my heart and my soul, the way I play, and I can't do it differently, I couldn't do it differently.
That's his thing, he's a quarter of New Order and that's his style. So I don't think you should throw away your tool of your trade just to be different. You should use it. And I think he has, with this stuff.
It was like a magical moment after all that thing I went through with Revenge. When I first heard What Do You Want From Me on the radio, and it started with the bass, and it was like, it's nice to be back.
Despite these solo projects, the ties that keep New Order together are still in place.
It did work, the whole thing worked, and it's made an impact on music. I mean, I've just been to America now on tour with Monaco, and everybody over there is just like enthralled and amazed by New Order. God, they're now saying we invented electronic music. New Order invented electronic music. And I'm, oh yeah, of course we did, mate. Great, you're right on there, spot on. I mean, they seem to forget that Kraftwerk were before New Order and things like that, But it's very strange. It's nice. I mean, I'm very flattered and I'm very complimented by the fact that Joy Division are still perceived to be absolutely wonderful, which I agree with. I thought they were wonderful. And New Order is still as important. We've not done anything for 5 years, and people still, gag for it.
I don't know, to me, it's kind of like New Order's just something else, beyond the people in it, or it's become something else.
We've not really spoken to each other for 3 years, maybe longer. So it's tentative, shall we say? It's tentative.
Love is found in the east and the west. When love is at home, it's the best. Love is the cure for every evil. Love is the air that supports the eagle. It's called love, and it's so uncool. It's called love, and somehow it's become unmentionable. It's called love, and it belongs to every one of us. It's called love, and it cuts your life like a broken knife. Oh, love, 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 love. It's called love, and it belongs to us. It's called love, 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 love. It's called love, and it belongs to everyone but us.
With sessions from Jamiroquai, Ocean Colour Scene and Corner Shop, Jules Holland brings us more music in an hour from now. And looking ahead to next week, don't forget to join John Sessions and Phil Cornwell for Stella Street. That's new on Fridays at 11:15 here on BBC Two.
It was a Joy Division song that's called Love Will Tear Us Apart.
high, but emotions won't grow. And we're changing our ways, taking different roads. And love will tear us apart again. Love will tear us apart again. Why is the bedroom so cold? Turn away on your side. Is my timing that flawed? I respect one so dry. Yet there's still this appeal that we've kept through our lives. Love will tear us apart again. 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 You cried out in your sleep, all my failings exposed. There's a taste in my mouth as desperation takes hold. Yet there's still this appeal